we're still stuck on getting individual memberships up and running.
Yeah. I'm starting the stream, so cool. All right, we're live. Thanks everyone for joining another episode of the Cross Project, the council meeting, the OpenJS Foundation. Today's the 19th of May or something. Thank you everyone for joining.
October.
A reminder. Yeah, exactly. Remember everyone to put their information in the Google Doc for the meeting notes. Cool. So we've got today's agenda, which I haven't updated in the doc. Sorry, I'm kind of bouncing around here. Today we're going to talk about the board seat, the community board seat, and then work on the code of conduct process blockers for onboarding projects. Again, sorry, I'm kind of just jumping around here. Oh, somebody's already got the issue. Great, thank you. Let me drop the agenda into the Google Doc. Should have done that beforehand, but so much going on. Let's see, agenda, pop that in there. Cool, all right, great, updated. So where was I? Do we have any announcements to start things off?
As usual, I have a whole boatload of announcements about upcoming meetings. So immediately following today's CPC meeting, we have the summit planning meeting, and we're really keen to have anybody interested attend. We're coming down to sort of the final couple of weeks before, I think we've got 5 weeks before OpenJS World and Collab Summit. So we really encourage all of the projects to get their sessions in ASAP, make sure that you're registered for both events so that you're getting updates and stuff like that. We really hope to see everyone there. Then at 7 p.m. UTC, we have the standards working group meeting. And then the marketing committee is meeting after that. So quite a few different groups meeting today, and you're welcome to all of them. I believe we also have office hours this week. Is that right, Joe, or is that next week?
That is correct. And this week, someone from the Node.js internationalization team is going to give a presentation, which I'm excited about because internationalization is an area that people are often keen to get involved in. So I'm excited about that.
And then on Friday, we're hoping to have a public session of the board meeting. So lots of different events this week, and a lot of it is again focused on kind of getting communities ready for the event. We also have a new shared channel in our Slack workspace with the Electron workspace. So pop in and say hello to our friends over in Electron. And that's all I got for you.
Cool. Yeah, just to kind of add on to that, we have the Monday of the OpenJS World Week is going to be a Collab Summit day that is focused on new contributors. So I encourage anyone from our community of projects to consider a new contributors session on that day. And if you want to trial out any content or approach to that in the open office hours, just let me know. Happy to facilitate. Any other announcements? Cool. Related to board updates, I know there's a meeting coming soon, but I'll just ask, has there been any response to pull request? I'm trying to open it up here. Pull request 531, which is updating requirements to regular members.
Oh, I still need to send that. I drafted it and I didn't send it. So either we will get a vote on that shortly here, or we will have a live vote on Friday. One way or another,
Okay.
Next week, that'll be taken care of.
Great, thank you. I only ask because there are a couple of other open pull requests that I want to get this landed before I reach out to some people.
Yeah, I'll just send that right now, Joe.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Anything else we want to touch on before we get into the agenda? I know, Michael, you had something about the collaboration network that you...
Yeah, I was just posted the link to a PR to move the collaboration network proposal from stage 0 to stage 1. So if people have a chance to review, so we can move that forward, that would be great.
Excellent. Just one other reminder, I think I've forgotten the last couple of meetings. If anyone can take notes, that's always helpful. I think one of our code of conduct sessions, there was very little notes. So if anyone can open that up and chime in whenever they are able to, that's awesome. Anything else? I think Eemeli, you touched on something you wanted to raise.
Yeah, related to the collab network of getting people outside of the projects themselves active, I really think we should do something about the individual membership program that we were supposed to have launched the first phase of in Q4 of last year and, well, didn't. It would be great to get that off the ground. While looking at the specifics of that, it's some of the things in phase 1 that mentions, namely the town hall meetings, are currently only a stage 0 proposal in our systems. So I was wondering, are we blocked on that, or are we blocked on something else, or have we just not thought about any of this for a while?
I just don't think we've had somebody actively pushing it forward.
It's a good thing to bring up, though. Myles, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I have my hand up, and it looks like Sarah Chips put their hand up as well. So after I'm done talking, I'd love to hand it off to her. So my understanding, is we came up with this proposal at a high level of what the program could look like, but we just haven't had an active champion. I do not believe that the town halls have been blocking it in any way, and if anything, I actually think the town halls should probably be teased out. It's something that we should maybe consider doing independent of the program. It's just kind of a useful thing that we can be doing. With regards to the program itself, I do think that, especially since it has kind of gone stale, for lack of a better way of putting it, which Eemeli, I think you were pointing out, I think we really should revisit first principles about what we want to host, how we want to host it, and how we want to do it. So a couple, like high level bits and questions that need to be answered. One would be, is it a membership program? I know that the foundation staff do have, some insight into how other organizations have done it, but calling it a membership actually creates legal responsibilities in the way in which it's handled, which may be higher than, what we want to do with this kind of program and what we wanted to accomplish. I think there's also a question about administration. So my gut is that it's not something that should be administered by the volunteer side of the house. Personally, it's something that likely should be administered by the foundation, which means that we should be working with them and getting buy-in into what a program like this would look like. There is a board seat that is actively tied to the program to be activated, and that's something that I think we need to decide, do we still want it to be tied to it, or do we want to activate it otherwise? I'm actually kind of at the point where I think they should be teased apart. And then finally, and most importantly, would be what we're expecting to do here, and if we're expecting to charge people, especially with the kind of economy and climate right now. How does it look if we're asking individuals to kind of give us money to support things? Now, for what it's worth, the conference we're running free now. People may still want to support the organization. We don't have swag with the conference, as far as I know. Robin and the staff can chime in. There's all sorts of things that we could do, or value that we could offer for a program like this. But I do, anyways, with all of those kind of haphazard notes, I really do think it makes sense to identify a new champion who wants to lead this initiative, and likely kind of rethinking from first principles what we want it to look like. And it will probably involve a variety of changes all the way to the bylaws of the foundation itself. Sarah, did you have anything you wanted to add?
As an answer to that one, what I think it should look like is very much like the collab network.
Yeah, I wanted to take an opportunity to raise my hand to get involved in this. I don't know. I've read what is currently in GitHub and the suggestions that are there. I think if you're looking to maybe start over, so I can clearly see the suggestions that are there. I don't know, being new, I don't know why they're there. So if the idea is to start over, happy to help if people want to provide me with a list of stakeholders or whatever is most helpful. This seems like something that would be helpful in getting to know the foundation structure better, and possibly being a set of new eyes that could be helpful.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I wonder how we should proceed on this. I mean, I think maybe we could take the conversation to the issue that I think Eemeli opened up. But I wonder if we should start some sort of, team or something to start fleshing it out, I think, or moving it forward, because there has been a lot of work already on it.
But it sounded like maybe Sarah was volunteering to, look at what's there and come up with a new proposal. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but
I think what I was offering to do is, so I've looked at what's there. I understand what's there. I'm not suggesting a new proposal, but what I've heard from this group is that it might be time to revisit the suggestion to see if it still makes sense. And I think a good way to do that would be to talk to a group of stakeholders. So I can pay attention to the GitHub issue and continue the conversation there. That's a suggestion on my part as an onlooker. So happy to defer to whatever this group thinks is best.
I'd love to help volunteer on that. I've been trying to learn more about the program and talking to a variety of stakeholders as well, including Chris, who had his experience at the JS Foundation. I know he couldn't make it today, so would be fantastic to have a small little task force on this.
Yeah, I agree. Great. All right. Well,
volunteer.
Great.
Sounds
yeah,
and
good. I'd be happy to help as well, time permitting. I'm curious to see how we can move this forward. Let's we have a couple other things we want to get going. Folks who are interested, pay attention to that issue. We can chime in on that issue and then spin something out of that, ad hoc meeting or what have you, and try to move that forward. Thank you. Excuse me. Anything else before we get into the agenda? Cool. We have two things that we wanted to work on, split evenly. The first one is the community seat, and then the other one is the unblocking code of conduct process issues for onboarding folks. Let's dive into the first one, being the community board seat. For folks who are unaware, I'll give some quick context. When the foundations were merged, we set aside some community seats for the board. One is elected from the voting members of the cross-project council. One for the first year, well, I'll just say one is assigned to the individual membership. And then the one that we're talking about today is, and the individual membership one is activated at a certain point. And since individual membership is sort of stalled, that's something that isn't in place at the moment. But the one we're focused on right now is the community seat that was given to Node.js for the initial year from the merger. And in our governance or charter, I can't remember which, it says, that'll happen for the first year, and the CPC will decide what to do for the following year, which is at the points that we are at right now. We've had discussions in the Node space and at the TSC and the community committee, and there is no really strong feelings to fight for the seat or object to not it being more of a community-based seat. There are folks in the Node space that would volunteer. So, you know, I think the thought is that we can kind of open this up, but I think we should decide as the cross-project council how exactly we want to move forward. So how exactly would we like to move forward? I'll say I'm in favor of it being a community, you know, a seat that is decided from the community overall. But there's really no process in place as to how we do something like that. So it's up to us to figure it out.
So the two decisions we have to make, right? First is to decide whether this stays with Node or becomes a community seat. And the second one is, if it's the latter, how do we sort of like decide to elect that person for that seat? Is that a good understanding?
I lost you for a second. I don't know if it was me or you, but what were the two things? I think
the first one was to decide whether we want this to be a community seat or a Node.js seat. And the second one is, if it's a community seat, how do we decide who to elect to that seat? Is that like a good way of splitting these two things up?
Correct.
I think you're right. Community, I mean, could mean all sorts of things. It could be like a second CPC seat. It could be something else, but.
Yeah. So first question being, is it a Node.js seat or not? I guess, to be very explicit. And if not, then how do we go about deciding how to allocate that seat?
So I would love to share, and I think I shared this with Joe once, and he was like, oh, really? That's what you were thinking? I didn't think that at all. I had the impression, and I could be totally wrong, right? But because it feels like a lifetime ago that we were going through all this initially, but I had the impression that one of these seats, and the one that's currently being held by Node, would be a seat that would be held for impact projects, and that we would kind of cycle through different, you know, impact projects taking turns holding that seat. So I honestly don't know where I got that impression anymore, but that was the understanding that I had. And so my expectation was that at the end of Michael's term, we would either say, oh, nope, yep, Node should keep it this year because there's more Node specific impact things, I don't know, that they have to do, or, you know, it would go to another impact project because there was something that they needed to do. I don't know.
I think it was discussed that that kind of thing was an option, but the governance was written to make it up to the CPC. You know, it could be another CPC seat. We could say, yeah, this other impact project needs a board member, or, you know, we left ourselves the flexibility to do what we think is best at this point.
So perhaps kind of building on that, Michael, if the intent is a representation of any project, if I recall correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, the existing board seat that we have is more of kind of like a CPC rep. So it's like representing one of the cross-project council members. Perhaps something that we could do that could be like flexible and fair is to do, you know, an open call to anyone from any of the projects to represent their projects on the board. And then Node can send a rep. If no one else submits anyone to apply, then kind of the status quo follows. But that seems to be kind of in spirit with what the original purpose was. I guess the only thing that we would need to figure out would be voting. I personally like the idea of like the CPC voting on it, but having really open nominations. I think that like keeps it kind of simple as far as executing the vote, as opposed to like, if we had closed nominations but everyone could vote, or open both, and like how we know who's eligible to vote starts getting really complicated. But I do think that, you know, a broader ask to kind of any foundation project, like, would you like board representation? Would you like to participate in this capacity? Do you have the capacity to do it? You know, may give some projects the ability to run.
Dylan has his their hand up.
Yeah, I would add to what Myles said, which was kind of the thing I said last week, which is we need to outline pretty clearly for the projects what it means to be on the board seat to see if there's any interest, I think. So I think, Myles, you said that in several different ways, but I think we just need to sort of fundamentally answer that question first to decide.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
And one thing just to add really quickly is I had like a side conversation with Brian Warner about this, and a lot of where I landed was inspired by that conversation. So just to give a shout out and
Cool.
you know, properly pointing at who inspired me there.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Just think that will kind of unblock a lot of these questions, I think. So the sooner we do that, I think the sooner we can, everything else will sort of flow from there, in my opinion.
I guess the only question would be, and we're probably fine, I think going about this is fine via the current bylaws, but we should just review that and make sure it's fine. I believe that the bylaws were written that Node gets it the first year, then the CPC can like basically assign it the second year. So I think all we need to do something like this is reach consensus, but it would be good to review and ensure that we're you know, following the bylaws appropriately. And then separately from that, Dylan, what are the needs of a board member and what they do is kind of like up in the air depending on who the board member is. I think some of the most important bits here are like, what is the risk of being a board member is one thing that I think is really important for people to have a heads up to. And then kind of like, what are the expectations of involvement is another one.
Yeah, the latter one, I think, is the thing that I think most people would want to know what's expected of them if they want to put their name in the hat on behalf of their project for it, I think.
I think Toby kind of had his hand up, and Eemeli does as well.
Okay.
Yeah, just a quick question, because this is something that I thought was brought up too, was the CPC elections. Is the person that's going to be elected to go to the board going to represent their project there, or be a representative of the community? Because that's sort of different, even if the person comes from a project, right? So I think like clarifying that and the expectations around that would be important. So that's just like the 2 cents I wanted to add to the conversation.
Thank you.
Right, that is the key. Sorry, Eemeli, go ahead.
Yeah, just reviewing the actual charter, one particular thing that I'm not sure if it's intentional or not, but there's this bit there. As described in the elections section, a multiple candidate method will be used for the voting for the first and second board members. And the thing that I'm wanting to raise here is that there's an implication here that either it should be the same one election for choosing these two individuals, or that the same election process might need to be used for both elections. Or we could discard this, basically, there's a nice term in Finnish that means comma fuckery about the details here, and just go with whatever we want.
I don't think there was any expectation that would constrain those two seats to be part of the same vote or anything like that. It's just text that we have had used in Node before.
Myles has his hand up.
Yeah, two different things. One, to Toby's comment, I think, but could be wrong, that this would likely be a project representation position, although I'm not sure if I love that. I think that is the framing that makes the most sense based on what the seat has already been used for. I think that if we wanted a broader community representation, that is kind of what the like non-activated individual membership program seat is. And so I think there's room to explore that. We also, like, to the point of what I think is in the bylaws, it's like up to us to decide what we want it to be allocated for. But I think kind of sticking to what is closer to the status quo today might be easier. And then Eemeli, just a small point to what you were saying is like, a lot of these bylaws around community representation in these seats where it was totally written in a vacuum, trying to think about what the future would be, but not really knowing it. And I think in general, it's probably beneficial for us to like, yeah, stay in the spirit of the law. But like the word of the law is something that we can change to reflect reality. And I think that if we, like, the reason to consult the bylaws is to not to like make a decision about how we'll handle it, but to make sure that if we handle it differently, that we appropriately update the documentation to reflect reality.
Yeah, I'll just jump in really
Good.
quickly and just note that this is defined actually in the CPC charter instead of in the bylaws. So it's a much easier change, and it's one that the CPC can make themselves. It's here under Section 8, and basically just says that CPC will determine its own methods and then review it once a year. So whether it's a project seat or whether it's general seat, then that's fine one way or another. Doesn't particularly matter, and the CPC is fully empowered to choose it. Other than that, really, there shouldn't be any other constraints. Eemeli, to your point there, the one piece of advice I'd have is just, these definitely were written in a vacuum and written, in a very forward-looking way. So I'd say let's choose the simplest interpretation wherever possible. Just makes it
Good.
much easier and much more accessible for
and I
did not
Yeah.
want to raise the previous point in order to argue for it, but just to make sure that we are aware of what we're doing as we're doing it.
I see that Matteo is unmuted. I just want to check and see if you had anything to add.
No, I'm good. I am
Okay.
hardware muted.
Okay,
So
great.
It's no, I am, I'm basically listening. So it's I by the way, from my point of view, it's good that somebody joins the be elected as from the projects, okay? But I don't necessarily see a good thing if the person that is elected is not part of the CPC.
I think the person who's elected would maybe automatically become part of the CPC.
Yeah,
Like-
I get that's totally that's totally fine. Okay. What I mean is, if somebody just go to the board and does never pass through the CTC or has never passed through the CPC or does not really participate on the CPC, it's probably not good overall for this community. So at least that's my only concern when
I would agree that one of the expectations should be that the person's been active with the CPC, because that gives them insight. Like if they're not active in this, then how are they going to be active back and forth, right? So I agree.
Yeah, but
I think that should be an expectation. Whether they have a history of it, I don't think it would have to require that, but I think that should be the expectation, and it would probably help them do a better job, in my opinion.
One thing I'd love to add.
Let me just say really quick, Myles. I would just say that if I would perhaps encourage folks to be involved in the CPC if they had an interest in the board, not like, well, we're going to start this. You haven't been a part of the CPC work, so you are blocked. You know what I mean? I think we should try to keep that broad net and encourage folks to be involved. Sorry, Myles, go ahead.
I absolutely agree with you. And I pasted the bylaws into the chat. And one thing I wanted to just say, and this is just a name, and from a Shakespearean perspective, what is in a name? Would a director by any other name attend as many meetings? Probably. But the second board member is called the at-large community director, is the actual name that we assigned it in the bylaws. We have the CPC director, the at-large community director, and then potentially a third director of the individual membership program. And so the CPC shall have the right to designate a third representative to the board of directors in accordance with above. So in spirit with the bylaws, like this is meant as like a kind of like an at-large community thing. We already have one that's specific to the CPC. So I think a huge +1, Joe, to what you're saying, in that like I think that this should be open to all the projects. I think that perhaps it would be a reasonable expectation that those folks are active in the project and have the buy-in of their project to be in this position. And that's something that we can kind of figure out during the nomination process and period. But separately from that, I don't think that it should be a requirement that they're active in the CPC today, but I do think that part of the expectations would be that they would become active in the CPC as part of taking on this role.
Yeah, I agree. Eemeli has their hand up. I just want to say though that we're at 37 past the hour. I wonder if we should cap this soon and move on to the code of conduct work. I'll let Eemeli talk and then we can figure that out.
Yeah, a bit the same as what Joe said there. What I think we should do is to not try and solve all of this ahead of time, but to now perhaps ask for parties that might be in one way or another interested to express such interest to, say, Joe, and for us to continue this discussion based on what do we actually have in the scope of who actually wants this job. If we only have one possible candidate for it, then, you know, this discussion is kind of moot. And the way that it's phrased in the charter, it means that we can revisit the whole foundation of how we make this decision every single year. So making a decision now is just for this year. It doesn't, you know, carry on for the future.
Yeah. Dylan, do you want to comment on your chat? Oh, you're muted.
Double muted, yes. I was just going to say, given I think the thing that's blocking us is exactly what Eemeli and Myles and others have said, which is like, let's get the short, like very concise version of what the expectations are and what the role is, and let's get that agreed upon as soon as we can, and then socialize that among the projects. And then I think we'll see if there's even any interest beyond Node at this point. And then that'll like allow us to pretty quickly decide what to do, I think. Or do we have a deadline for this? I think you said July, right? Last time, or when's the seat expire?
I believe that that's when it is, in July.
Yeah. So if we could get like a one pager that just says, hey, this is what the role is, this is what you'd be doing, this is what we expect from you, this is what would be beneficial, this is what you'll actually do, then I think we could distribute it to all the projects real fast and see if there's any interest at all beyond Node and roll with it from there.
Yeah, should we create a Google Doc or something in the issue that's there already, or how should we move forward on it?
Either Google Doc or a gist or pull request or whatever you want. Yeah.
Brian, weren't you working on the first draft of that?
Brian Warner?
That's also muted. Yeah, I've got it on my to-do list. It's I haven't been able to get to it yet.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I just think that would save us, like, I think that would address all these sorts of blockers that we're, you know, debating, which may not even matter. So, yeah. Cool.
I would
Let me know,
love
Brian,
us to be able to
work on that.
offload even that to whoever wants the job, but by effectively saying, we have this thing, it's called this director, please send us a description of what you think this should mean and why we should select you.
Yeah, I don't, well, then we won't get anyone to reply. So.
If we actually want to get a broader set of candidates, then we should actually do the work.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. And Brian, if you wanna work on that with someone, let me know. I'm happy to help you flesh that out.
Yeah, I'm happy to give my feedback as well if it's useful.
Gladly take everybody who would
Likewise.
like to help up on that offer. Yes.
And yeah, I think the suggestion of a Google Doc is good because I don't think this is like a formal, like PR'd vetted thing. It's just more of like an informal, like this is, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think this has to be part of the formal process per se, because it's more just a summary of the information that's already out there. So I think a Google Doc's probably perfectly fine for that.
Yeah,
I
that
think
sounds
we, like Brian, did we have some existing write-up like this in the past? I'm just thinking if we found that, posted that, and then we can kind of tweak it in the Google Doc based on, you know, requirement, you know, what that'll probably be more generic, and then we can add in the expectations that the CPC has on sort of on top of that.
Yeah, I wonder if there's something generated maybe for Node Foundation or for JSF. I don't think that we've had one for OpenJS.
I don't think it was probably since we did the merger, but for those
yeah.
previous ones, I kind of had the sense there was a, hey, here's the board expectations of a.
Yeah, but I mean, even like simple questions like,
yeah, something short, right, Dylan? Yeah.
Like, how often do you meet? What do you meet about? What do you talk about? What responsibilities, what decisions do you have to make?
Yeah,
Who do you
some
need to report
expectations.
information back to? Like just that kind
Yeah,
of stuff. I
CPC
think
and
would be,
yeah.
yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's work on that offline, asynchronously, what have you. Google Doc would be great. Drop it into the issue. We could chat about it a little bit in Slack too if we need to. But let's flesh something kind of short out that we could start to circulate, and we can move forward on that. My apologies. It's already 42 after, so we don't have a lot of time for the code of conduct process. But I think we should maybe jump over to that and see where we're at. Any objections to that? I appreciate the conversation on the board seat, so I think that was good. Thank you. Jory, can I ask you what your thoughts are on blocking onboarding in terms of COC process stuff?
Yeah, so just to make the most out of the very short time we have, I think the best use of our time on this topic would be to point everyone to the PR that I've just pasted into the Zoom chat on the, oh, sorry, wrong. Sorry, that's oh, okay, cool. Why is this thing, I'm on the wrong thing. No, no, it's right issue, sorry. My goodness, there's too many.
In the summit?
No, yes, I'm on the wrong, I just pasted the wrong one. Cool girl, I'm so cool. Here we go.
Did you paste it to, oh, there it is.
Okay, there it is. Okay, so this is a pull request on the code of conduct repo, which is a stab at documenting some of the issues that we were discussing last week, which is really how do we make it very clear to projects what it is that we're looking for and what we expect. So I had a couple of comments from Joe and Mateo on it so far, but the goal here is to really provide to an onboarding project some clear guidance on those steps that they need to take and what we're looking for. So we have right now basically two options that we've, and there could have been 3 or 4 that were discussed that I didn't get captured, but that's why this is a draft, One is link to it, create a code of conduct file for your project repositories that includes a very short piece of text that says something like, this project adheres to the OpenJS Foundation of Code of Conduct. That links to the canonical URL. Please email project's reporting email address with questions or to report a violation. Very short and sweet. Option 1. Option 2, we present them the consumption of the full document, which is to create that code of conduct file, copy in our code of conduct in its entirety, and then update specific pros in the reporting -project spaces section. I don't know if there were other things, other variations, other suggestions, as Mateo had commented that he prefers it when projects put this sort of information in a .github folder. Do we want to tell them specifically where this file needs to be?
Like from my point of view, having it into the .github folder, it would be recommended for organizations. So it's automatically applied to all repos in the org. And it shows up everywhere whenever they send, there is a contribution and so on, it shows up and it's correctly linked. The side effect for that, it is not in the repo itself. So it shows up in the GitHub UI, but not in the repo itself. So there is that.
The only feedback that I've heard on that pattern, Mateo, and this is like just from someone from like a different type of org, which is that they prefer not to keep files that they expect humans to read in the .github folder, which is a valid point of view.
No, wait a second. I didn't say the .github folder. It's the .github repo.
Ah.
Oh, for the org.
So if you create a .github repo in an org, all those files are shared by all the repos. All those settings are shared by all the repos. So essentially, you can have there a single issue template, or let me
That
see.
sounds nice. Yeah, I didn't know that existed.
Is this a thing? Like, I'm just learning something crazy,
Yeah,
really
that
great
must be.
about GitHub
Here it
right
is,
now.
guys, folks. I'm just pasting the one we're using Fastify. So here it is in the chat. So these applies to all.
You can put directly in that repo. You can put the security policy, code of conduct, a bunch of files that humans should read, as well as the ones you. And if you want, you can put the ones you don't want humans to read in a .github folder in the .github repo.
Aha.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
And this finally actually also works on individual user accounts. Not that that's particularly relevant to the foundation.
That's cool.
One of
Okay.
the things that we've done in other projects has been to have this .github repo, and then it does replicate it out to any repo in the organization where you open up a PR or an issue. However, there could be situations where a collaborator has cloned the repo and says, "Hey, where's the code of conduct file?" And in that case, then we just added essentially a blank code of conduct file that includes a link off to this particular repo directly to the code of conduct file in the .github repo. So you're essentially covering all of your bases at that point.
And should it show up? Like, I've gone to like the Fastify helmet repo and I don't see a code of conduct file.
It doesn't show up as a file. It only shows up if you open up a PR or an issue.
So
And that's one of the reasons for putting in the stub file there.
I think the stub file is necessary.
Yeah, I agree.
We need to keep it easy to find.
Yes. However, it is somehow is like, let me see how it shows up if you are not a contributor, but it's.
We can also ask for just to mention specific words at the bottom.
I mean, when you say easy to find, if you put it in the local repo, it's in the .github folder, right? Or it's just or are you saying you just put it at the root?
When it shows, so it shows in it shows when you open an issue or when you interact. Mm-hmm. So when you interact with the repo, it shows this is the link to the code of conduct. It's not linked anywhere else. So there is that piece.
Yeah, that to me personally is really not functional. Like discoverability is like I'm in the repo and I see a code of conduct file and I click on it. Now that leading to somewhere else where it lives is fine. I'm still not thrilled about like the source of truth being a .github repo, because that's not really like where I think to look for stuff like this. But if it's something that people are using across GitHub, it will, I guess, over time become more of a like expectation. Perhaps this is even just a feature that we could give to GitHub themselves about like improving discoverability and making a clear button in the repo or something like that of what the code of conduct is. Because for me, if I go to contribute somewhere, I look at the repo and I'll go look for the code of conduct. I don't want it in a subfolder. I don't want it in a distant repo. And at least in the Node project up until now, we've had those kind of like stub files that point, and I think that's absolutely fine.
Eemeli has their hand up.
Why are we talking about implementation? Let's just require that it be clearly indicated, and these are some example ways of how you can do that.
I think also this conversation could be had in that pull request. We can flesh that out further.
I was going to say, I think we're out of time, but I would encourage us on this, but I would really encourage y'all to help me out and continue this discussion on the pull request, so we can get her done.
I would say this is more in line with your option 1, even though it's different, and I would prefer that over your option 2, which is manually copying it everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we'll move the discussion to the GitHub issue, and I encourage folks to put their 2 cents in there, or thumbs up, someone else's comment or what have you. and we can move this forward. In the interest of moving things forward, I'll ask about next week's meeting. Should we start on this? Continue working on code of conduct process issues and really try to make sure that onboarding projects are not blocked in any way on this. And there's more work to do beyond that, but I think that's the initial thing we need to make sure we get done.
So I would say that if we can make meaningful progress on this pull request and also on approving the charter for the Code of Conduct Working Group between now and next week's meeting, we're probably good until I have a cycle to pull the the group together to figure out what the next most important work item is.
Okay, great.
So
encourage folks to look at the pull request. It's pull request number 2, if I remember correctly, in the Code of Conduct repo in the OpenJS Foundation org. And then also in the Cross-Project Council repo, there is a pull request adding the Code of Conduct working group to the working groups with a charter and responsibilities.
The feeling that one's ready to land.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we just need to leave it open for a little bit longer to make sure. So folks could just take a look at those two. That'd be great. Next week we'll plan on doing the agenda, which I think is good because we do have a few things that we want to wrap up on and a couple that we want to get progress on. So that sounds like a good plan. We have 7 minutes left, so maybe we'll stop here and drop into a private session for a few minutes and then call it a wrap. Sound good? Cool. Thank you, everyone. I'll ask folks who are not voting members or regular members or foundation staff to drop. We'll have a quick, short private session and carry on. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Hold tight while I